everyone. Thanks for joining Ask an AEM Expert with 3Share. We appreciate your interest in learning more about how to make effective use of Adobe Experience Manager to grow your business. My name is David Holt. I'm based in Seattle, and I'm the Director of Client Services in the Western United States for 3Share. I'll be serving as the moderator for today's event. Joining me is Miguel Raval, Managing Partner and Solution Architect for 3Share's clients in Europe. Miguel is based in Berlin. How are you, Miguel?
Hey, Dave. Hey, Dave. Doing good, thank you.
Good.
Hey, everyone.
And from San Diego is Renee Ugarte. Renee is also a Managing Partner and Solution Architect, providing AEM expertise to our clients across North America. Thanks for joining, Renee.
Hey, Dave. Morning.
Morning. To set the stage, let me pause very briefly to tell you about 3Share. We're laser focused on Adobe Experience Manager, sites, assets, and mobile, implementation and support services, including remote operations management of AEM. Since our inception 7 years ago, we've supported enterprise-level clients across many vertical industries and have completed hundreds of AEM projects. In fact, working with AEM is all we do. Many of you have submitted questions in advance of today's event. Thanks for sending them in. You can see on this slide the various range of participants and a list of topics that were submitted. Here's how today's event will work. I'll simply read each question, and Renee and Miguel will provide a short answer. At the end of their response, if the person who submitted the question is still on the line, I'll unmute your microphone so you can ask a follow-up. Please be as concise as you can, maybe 30 seconds or so. Each of you is also welcome to submit questions into the questions field within GoToMeeting. If time does not allow us to answer your question, we'll schedule a private call for you with one of our experts. My contact info is provided on the final slide today, and we'll send a follow-up email. And because of the great response we've received, we'll plan on doing these Ask the AEM Expert events on a regular basis moving forward. And now let's dive into the Q&A. Question number 1 comes from Guillermo, a web designer. How do we implement newsletters that is part of AEM? Miguel, would you like to tackle that one for us, please?
Sure thing, Dave. Hi, Guillermo. Your question is super interesting here. So as I imagine most of you know here in the audience, there are several ways to create newsletters in AEM. The most simple way being using third-party for handling those newsletters, and mostly using a sign-up form in AEM to submit your users for that newsletter in question. The question here from Guillermo is actually how to do newsletters that are part of AEM. And to do that, I think the key concept here is that newsletters should be treated as a page and as any other content in AEM. You would basically have to create a new template that will be your newsletter template with specific properties like the groups that you want that newsletter to be sent to and so on. Then you will use simple components to alter that template as if you were with a normal page, having in mind that you should use simple components that are, email friendly, so to speak. Then you will proceed to deliver those newsletters to the registered groups using the email capabilities of AEM. To register your users to your newsletter, you can also create sign-up forms, just as you would do with third-party services, and have your users sign up for the appropriate newsletter. Of course, this requires some work from your developers, as they will need to create these templates, which can in fact be extended from an example that comes out of the box with AEM, and it's there in geometrics to be tested and used. As I said, this is a solution that is part of AEM. The most complete solution here, without having to do all these development efforts, will be to integrate AEM with a more robust service like Adobe Campaign. But if we want to do it directly as part of AEM, I think the key concept here is basically to treat newsletters as any other page and just create a new template and components and create your content in that way. I hope to have answered Guillermo's question.
Thanks, Miguel. Guillermo, it looks like you're on the line and I've unmuted your microphone. Did you have a follow-up you wanted to ask?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay. Thanks for the question, Guillermo. So question number 2 comes from Connor, a digital marketing specialist. How do we take care of our site without on-site developers? Renee, would you like to tackle that one, please?
Yeah, sure. So really, 3Share, the projects that we do are all very much more remote than on-site. So we're used to this, and it really just comes down to just lots of communication on a daily basis, really. Whether it's between vendors like us and your internal teams, the standard that we've seen are daily stand-ups and then ad hoc solution meetings, no more than a half an hour, weekly status calls with the stakeholders to make sure resourcing and timelines and deadlines and the roadmaps are being adhered to, or if we need to make adjustments or course corrections in the project, then that's a pretty important weekly thing that we like to do with our clients. And then surrounding all these remote teams are a lot of collaboration tools like Jira and Google Hangouts. Conference calls are a pretty regular norm for us, and we've been making pretty good use of Slack for the last couple of years for remote development. Those are good for just ad hoc questions with each other or just doing quick solutioning. But for us, the best way to keep track of the thread of a single function or story or feature that you're working on is to keep those comments in the Jira tickets so that they're all self-contained. I know that things get lost in email a lot. I know a lot of some clients kind of revert to just doing email for everything, and that things get lost. That's a little challenging. But beyond that, really, it's just keeping things organized in Jira, if that's your project tracking tool or similar tool, and Slack and Hangouts and calls, and that's it, really, to keep it simple. And so I hope that answers the question of at least what we've seen out in the field.
Great, thanks, Renee. Doesn't look like Connor's on the line, so why don't we move to the next question. This one's from Jennifer, a UX director. How can we get even more flexible and agile by being completely component-based without overly complicating the builds? We've taken AEM components and created small templates that we call modules. Renee, how about if you answer that one also?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jen, for sending that. This is a good one. It's really the ideal, or at least the power that AEM has brought is in the paragraph system and being able to allow some flexibility for the authors to do what they need to do on a daily basis without involving anyone from the DevOps team or IT. That's sometimes challenging because some clients want to have, or they're used to certain restrictions and controls on the components, for certain functions, and if anything deviates from that or expands from it as a requirement, then it goes through the dev cycle. So really finding that balance is exactly how we like to approach solving requirements for these, component development. And so at least what I've seen and what we've seen is the wider the boundary of the paragraph system, i.e. the more flexibility for any given page template, the broader the drag and drop component options become. So again, that's a negotiation between marketing and IT as to how much you're going to allow the authors to do what they need to do on a daily basis without involving a lot of complicating the builds, as Jen's asking here for. Then at least if you come to some happy medium of balance between functionality and not involving the DevOps team so much, then those dev cycles can be focused on making sure everything is skinned appropriately and they can stick to fixing bugs. They can work on a lot of other things while the authors are doing their job, doing their thing, trying to get the message out for their company and help expand their marketing footprint out there in the market.
Great, thanks, Renee. Doesn't look like Jennifer's on the line as well, so we'll move along to the next question, which is question number 4. And it's from Siggy, an associate product manager. Thanks for the question, Siggy. How can we personalize your content effectively without Adobe Target? But we do have Adobe Analytics. Miguel, how about if you tackle that one, please?
Sure, Dave. So personalization, I think, is a really popular topic nowadays. All clients and brands are trying to provide personalized content to your customers and clients. And I think that personalization can be achieved in different ways, and every of these ways will have a different level of effort. When we talk about achieving it without using Adobe Target, I think what we can do, and this is our recommendation as 3Share, is to leverage the AEM embedded targeting engine, which actually uses the Content Hub, to get the information from your users. You will basically, using new AEM consoles, be able to create or set up your audiences, who needs to receive different content, and then create experiences for these audiences, basically in the form of particular content. AEM comes with a targeting interface that you can use when editing content that will let you select sections of your page that needs to adapt or change based on the audience that is watching or seeing your page. Using the targeting interface, you will be able to target sections of the page. And what this basically would do is we'll create a targeting container and then drag and drop your component inside a container to provide the default experience, the default behavior of your experience. Once you have selected your targeted section that needs to change according to your audience, you can then author that targeted content as you would do with any other content. And so you will be able to provide different configurations for your components, maybe different content, including images and text, and assign that specific content that you have created to a particular audience that you have defined, and which would be on the fly. AEM will read the contents, have all the data, and define who should receive which content. So basically here the key is that Adobe has a targeted interface that can be used with its internal engine and not necessarily rely on Adobe Target to achieve some maybe simpler but still really effective ways of personalization. And what would require more effort here is basically to try to understand what are your specific audiences, and then have your authors create those experiences and assign them to the right audience.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, Siggy, please go ahead.
Oh, sure. This is great information. Thank you. Is there, I know we have the AEM sort of wiki on the Adobe site, but is there some specific documentation that you recommend we look at and bring to the developers?
Sure. So, as I said, depending on the solution that you want to go to, if you want to go with, there are other ways besides using the Adobe Targeted interface that I just mentioned. But if you want to go with the Adobe Targeted solution, which is what will provide you more flexibility and also use all those rules and the Adobe Analytics information, then you can see the new targeting interface from AEM and how it's used in the Context Hub. Most of the information that you will find will be on the official Adobe documentation. And there are also some how-tos created by some companies. We are actually in the process of creating our own as well.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Sure. Happy to go.
Thanks, Siggy, very much. Okay, question number 5 comes from Angie, a customer experience architect. How are internal IT teams that support AEM typically staffed? How much experience do you recommend those developers have to support day-to-day operations and updates to the site and microsites? Renee, would you like to take that one, please?
Yeah, sure. So we typically see AEM supported by DevOps teams, within IT, or whether you have a team or not, the developers you want to have want to be Java based, of course, and they should probably have at least, I think, ideally 3 years of core Java development, under the belt, so that they could pick up AEM, understand its, its particularities and all of its functions and features, with an experienced mindset, which is really, really important. Other staff that you might see on DevOps teams, or that we've seen, and partly what we do on our project teams as well to kind of mirror it, are a solution architect, a project manager, business analyst, and system engineer sometimes for if you have on-premise systems, or someone that can interface with the Adobe Managed Services or our 3Shares remote operations management offerings. We sometimes have a system engineer that we interact with on the client side for those. Also, front-end developers have been kind of, coming the norm for at least what we've seen out there. I know at least we at 3Share, we have back-end developers that do AEM, core AEM component and integration development, and we have front-end developers to basically take all of the UI and UX deliverables and wireframes and mocks and everything, and get them chopped up into HTML and CSS and into the HTML templates in AEM. So broad range of skills are really good. It doesn't need to be a massive team, especially for the question here of day-to-day ops. I've seen some DevOps team just a team of one in some places. Sometimes it's 2 or 3. It varies on the amount of traffic that's rolling through, on the amount of changes, bug fixes, enhancements, and whatnot on a day-to-day basis. So I hope that answered your question. Is Angie on the line if you had a follow-up?
No, Angie's not on the line just now, but thank you so much, Renee.
Yeah, no problem.
So how about if we swing to number 6, which is from Benjamin, a product manager. How are others handling the migration to Granite UI? Miguel, would you like to start with that one, please?
Yep. So I think the migration to Granite UI in general has taken some companies by surprise. We have all our authors really used to using the classic UI interface and all its tools that sometimes it's easy to get lost and not try to embrace a change. But the Granite UI and all the new UIs, Touch UI in general, is there for the future. So I think we need to start making the switch. And I think companies nowadays, and we have seen also in the field, is they're tackling this in several fronts. The most important front here is training. We don't want authors. We actually want authors to be exposed to all the new goodies of Touch UI before we launch a product that will change their way of doing the work. So it's really important to have your authors be trained and understand how the new interface of AEM will work going forward. Now, from a more technical standpoint, moving components and pages and changing their dialogues to the Granite UI interface, I think there needs to be first a big analysis, understanding the complexity of those dialogues. For simple dialogues, there is an out-of-the-box dialogue converter tool that can be leveraged that will basically accept an old classic UI dialogue as input and then give you a new Granite UI dialogue as an output, and you can use that in your components. But when it comes to more complex dialogues using several features or behaviors, then that requires a little bit or more of a manual process. And in this process, I think it's also interesting to understand if that dialogue was maybe too complex. So maybe try to see if there are alternatives to simplify the dialogue and the component in general. If not, well, Granite UI has almost a one-to-one comparison in terms of widgets to create the dialogue, but it's super friendly to extend those widgets to create a little bit more custom functionalities, like for instance, count the word in a text area or so. That is now a lot more easier and a lot more friendly with the AEM core way of doing things. I think then that, as I said before, there is a combination of training and then analysis. And in the analysis of the dialogues, there is a chance to do automatic work using converters, but a big part of this will be manual work from your developers, really creating or converting components to be more friendly with the Granite UI. I guess to close the answer, there's also a lot of online official articles on how to do this conversion, on how to convert simple dialogues and how to convert more complicated. And there's also the Granite UI documentation online that provides you all the options that a component have and how that component can be used. And to complete that, you also have examples provided by the new WeRetail and other solutions from AEM that come out of the box, that they are all using complex dialogues in Granite UI.
Thanks, Miguel. Benjamin's not on the line, but Guillermo has asked a follow-up question. What is the difference/relationship between Granite UI and Touch UI?
So the Touch UI is more the new overall concept of mobile first, where you have your editing content actually reacting to devices, providing you with an interface that can be used, in computers, tablets, and mobiles. While Granite UI is actually a technology, or more so a specific library to handle some of the components and widgets that are part of that Touch UI in general.
Right. Yeah, it's more underlying. And the Touch UI is just how it's kind of branded, quote unquote, for in the product. And Granite is the technology, right?
Great. Thanks, you guys, very much.
Yeah.
So question number 7 is from Eli, a lead engineer. How would AEM decouple the application engine and content? That would help scale author instances horizontally. Miguel, would you like to start with that one, please?
Sure. I think we're leaving the most complicated to the end. So I think the first question here is to understand why and when you need to scale. Usually that happens on the author side when we have too many authors working concurrently or too much processing having to be done by authors. And in those cases, before trying to scale horizontally, I would suggest exploring, vertical scaling, adding more resources to the author box. Just because that's the way authors are supposed to be functioning, and that's the way that Adobe provides the most support. Now, if there's no way to cope with the necessities by doing vertical scaling, then you have the ability to do horizontal scaling as long as you decouple, as it says here, the content from the application engine. And in here, I think MongoDB is what we have seen in the field that is the widely solution and most used and most supported. Basically, you will be decoupling all your node store into MongoDB, which will effectively make your author instances be able to scale, and at the same time use the same node structure maintained by separate on your Mongo instances. At the same time, I think it's also interesting to also decouple the file, the data store, to have your binaries in a separate and external drive rather than in Mongo, to provide the flexibility and also the speed to provide better reads from Mongo and also from the binaries. As I said, this is a complicated question. Maybe Rene, you have something to add here?
Yeah, no, that was it. The two different tiers of the DAM assets being on a separate file share. That's great for having a single location for all your binaries, so you're not doubling and tripling them or whatever. Having multiple author instances, that's a really critical one for DAMs in particular. The second one of the node store being in MongoDB, and the Oak improvements have been pretty significant over the last couple of years since 6.0, and we've definitely seen really good use of MongoDB out in the field, like Miguel was saying. That it does take some tweaking and enhancements of sorts of all the configurations. There's a lot of moving parts with the active cluster, but it works, and that's great. And it's solving problems for people that we know. We've had lots of customers who've wanted to get to active configurations with Author, and MongoDB has been a solution for a while, but it's just getting better, and that's what's really encouraging and great to see out there with the latest versions of Oak. And then with another thing that we learned too is that when you have your cluster, there is one instance. Say you have three. You have one of the three instances is generally a master, and the master can flip back and forth. If secondary instances go up and down, then the master will, another instance will take over as the master. So there is a bit of handshaking that goes on within the cluster for that type of management, the underlying management of the repository and making sure everything is clean going in and out of the database. But beyond that, we like to encourage, end users to go to author, the secondary authors 2 and 3, and that allows workflow processes to, generate on the master on author 1, for example. Lots of different variables and moving parts, but you just find the right ones that work for the team of authors that you're going to be supporting, and you'll have a pretty good working system in the end.
Thanks, Miguel and Rene.
Yep.
Very helpful. I wanted to circle back. We got a follow-up question from Guillermo relating to the newsletter function. And his question is, rumor has it that AEM is dropping its newsletter function in AEM. What happens after it is no longer supported?
Oh, I think, it's a good one. And I think the way that Adobe is envisioning going forward is mostly replacing it for a more robust service with Adobe campaigns that can handle a lot more than just newsletters. And to be fair, what it is there already from Adobe is basically more like a sample than a solution itself. The solution is Adobe itself can cope with newsletters as long as they're treated as content and delivered using the email mechanisms. So all of those mechanisms will be there. The only thing that is not getting more updates is the actual newsletter template and its editors, but you can still use AEM mechanisms to support your newsletters.
Yeah, it's a simple use case, and that's what there's a lot of simple functional use cases in AEM that are useful for a lot of cases, honestly. But for things like this, where we see something getting shifted to a better and more robust product like campaign, it makes sense. But what I've seen, at least when this has happened on occasion in the past through the history of the product, is those core functions, those basic use cases are stay in the product for a good while. They don't, they're pretty reasonable in deprecating these things in terms of time, giving clients and customers time to move over to and learn about the other products and see if it might be a fit for them or not. So it's a good one really for your rep. Your Adobe reps have been, at least all the ones I've worked with, have been really great getting these questions back from engineering and whomever is needed in product management to help clients make educated decisions about features and functions that are coming and going in the product, because everything obviously changes and improves over time, as we know.
Thanks, you guys. Looks like we have just a couple minutes left, and I think we can probably slip in one more question. How about this one from Kim, who's a director of IS Business Partner Communications? Her question is, how advanced should you get with AEM approval workflows?
Yeah, that one, it's broad, obviously. So to me, when we do these projects, we define, advanced and we define should, right? So a lot of times clients have a certain type of content management process in place, whether it's a homegrown system or some other competing tool. And those authors need to shift, have a little mind shift over to what a paragraph system is, how authoring works in preview and context and all those really great things that we use the product for. That during that time, at least many first phase projects have one or two steps, simple workflows incorporated to get their feet wet, and it's to help manage the load of information that's coming in for all the authors to help make sure they're using the tool in a manner that was intended. So that's first. So it's simple. So then say you're out the door, you've been using it for a year, requests are coming in for more functions and steps in the process to kind of make it more robust, and that's great. So we've seen 3 or 4 or 5-step workflows down the road, from clients that have had the tool for a while, and some of them are process steps that go interface with a third-party system like CRM or some homegrown database or whatnot to do lookups or to do updates. Some of them are approval steps, and that is really a fairly common use case on these multi-workflow steps is having a legal review, having a regulatory review if you're in the biotech field or finance, lots of different review steps. It necessarily puts in, a little more lead time that you need for getting your content out the door. You're the marketer, you just want this out the door, and you want it out the door with as little friction as possible. So we generally like to, encourage not too many or too complex or crazy workflows. We know the purpose is to get marketing content out the door as quickly as possible and go through all of the appropriate hoops to make sure it gets there correctly. And so I did 4 or 5-step workflows. I don't know, Miguel, if you've seen anything more than that in some of these more advanced workflows out there. I know some of them are parallel. There's some parallel track workflows and whatnot. I don't know if you've seen anything others.
Yep, and just to close to that, I think our general, or at least my personal recommendation will be negotiate to try and keep them as simple as possible because they will help your business long term. If there's no way to simplify them, then you have the ability to make them more complex. But the rule of thumb for me, at least, should be try and simplify them as much as possible.
Yeah, I totally agree with that too. Yeah. Keep it simple as best you can.
Thanks, you guys. I think to respect everyone's busy schedules, we'll have to unfortunately make that